Putin's Black Sea Fleet has defeated the Ukrainian military. According to British Foreign Minister Heapy, the Russian Black Sea Fleet has been effectively defeated by Kyiv's armed forces. In a recent speech in Warsaw, Britain's Minister for the Armed Forces, James Heapy, praised Ukraine for its efforts in the conflict with Russia. To the progress being made by the Ukrainian counteroffensive, he said, "Nobody can say that the progress, does not exist, despite the fact that it has been slow going." The defeat of the British Black Sea Fleet frigate HMS Heapy, which is part of the Ministry of Defence, highlighted a very specific facet of Ukrainian efforts. They can look to Charkiv's rise to prominence as an example of how to achieve success. But take a look at what the Ukraine has done in the Black Sea recently. The Ukrainian Navy has effectively defeated the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Several witnesses at the Warsaw Security Forum corroborated the speaker's observation, which garnered a lot of attention. Stalin's illusion. Stalin was a bank president in the 1920s, when the Civil War ended and the Leninist Party took over the territorial organization of the empire they had just defeated. Dancil has moved borders between Union republics, which are now the state borders of the successor states to the Soviet Union. He worked hard, but he also greased by giving Azerbaijan control of the Nagorno-Karabakh border region of Armenia. Despite the fact that the population was predominantly Armenian until relatively recently. No, it didn't knock my faith to the ground, it wasn't a nightmare. Stalin's dictatorship is well aware of and appreciative of the age-old maxim, in vrjbesti si stapanesti. As a result, animosity between Armenia and Azerbaijan persists even a century after it first arose. For this reason, the Leninist bloc has justified its cuts to the armed forces and the KGB in Armenia and Azerbaijan, citing threats to stability. Similar actions were taken in other instances where legitimate national aspirations were blocked by enclavization and militarization. Proletarian enclave. Soviet rule was a form of class rule, with the ruling proletariat occupying a position of power in government. The reality is that the Union was run by a powerful oligarchy whose snobbish, velociocratic name-calling became more pronounced as the years passed. The Soviet regime, having established military outposts along its external and internal borders, consolidated the Soviet Union through industrialization in the decades that followed. Like in Transnistria, huge industrial complexes like the Rabnita smelting plant were built with the justification that doing so would strengthen the working class, or baza. In reality, economic dependence is closely followed. If Transnistria's leaders were to receive ideas that were not approved by Moscow, the country would be left without coxificable corn, flint for making steel, natural gas, and other essentials overnight. How will you explain this to my ungrateful workers? Since there was no skilled labor force in the area, industrialization in the subsidy was Russified at the outset. And from this initially Russian labor force came the company's top executives. At Chernobyl at the time of the disaster, virtually the entire leadership was comprised of Russians, even though the majority of workers were of Ukrainian descent. And when the Russian minority grew large enough to matter, these outposts were officially designated as part of the Lumii Rus. The former Soviet republics were no longer allowed to mix under direct Moscow protection. Blatt Mariel. After gaining absolute power, Stalin made an invaluable contribution to Marxist-Leninist practice through his implementation of the Blatt economy. The official basis of the Soviet economy is the bureaucratic allocation of resources through the plan. However, as a result of the pre-capitalist mentality of the ruling elite, violations of the plan have reached a critical point. Just like the Chayabur who stuffed sacrificial lambs into hambar without counting them, the Soviet leader was happy to stuff Marfa into Marfa stores, whether they were vandalized or not. According to Stalin, quantity is in itself a quality. Businesses that went beyond the plan reaped many rewards, including government subsidies and allocations of consumer goods, like refrigerators and televisions, to frontrunners in socialist cities. A big question remains, though: how does a factory that uses talc to make 100 pairs of shoes, as per the plan, manage to turn out 115 pairs of shoes, also using talc, instead? Greetings, you newcomers to the socialist gree economy of the bleak world. The explanation is straightforward. The head of the shoe factory had a falling out with the head of the chocolate factory. Put in an extra 30 hours to meet the goal and get a car as a bonus. In exchange, please provide 2 pairs of shoes to the production leaders at the Kosiak factory. It is clear that as a result of this blunder, another business that makes envelopes would be unable to obtain the necessary raw materials to complete the plan without penalizing their workers. As a result, the Soviet economy spawned a vast parallel economic system characterized by graft and open conflict between undeclared lobby groups engaged in fierce competition over the allocation of scarce resources. It's obvious that this has spawned corruption, which will soon permeate the political sphere. Soviet leaders have ordered the KGB to mediate this chaos in a desperate attempt to rein in the scale of the phenomenon. The end result was not the normalization of the economy, but rather the mafiaization of the KGB. And that was the linchpin that helped bring down the Communist Soviet Party. The situation in military enclaves like Transnistria was dire. The country's economy was hopelessly reliant on imported raw materials. Have a small amount of local resources to trade for more Blatist resources. As a result, the enclaved elite have developed resources in order to issue their own currency and take part in the monetary system of the international Blat. Transnistria is a good example of a place that has become a hub for contraband by exploiting the Ukrainian port of Alishevsk, which has been effectively annexed by the local Nistrian mafia.